right, I'm going to start by having you all close your eyes for just a few seconds. I want you to visualize your kindergarten classroom. Okay, open your eyes. Like many of you, I vividly remember going to kindergarten for the first time. I remember my dress with the poofy sleeves and the bright red apples. I remember walking into the classroom excitedly, looking around and getting immediately pissed off. I was 5 years old, 3 feet tall, and staring in complete disbelief at a room that for the first time in my tiny life was fully customized to me. In this new perfect world, the tiny chairs were just the right size. The tables, the coat hooks, the cubbies, the doors, the toilets, the sinks, all tiny. And it made me wonder why I was constantly struggling in a world that was so wrong-sized when right-sized was so possible. Of course, I quickly realized that that perfect me-sized room was in fact not perfect. It had rules that did not work for me, a social order that teachers imposed upon me, and bullies that made fun of my mom for her disability. I had to color inside the lines and play with kids who had nice things that didn't share. This room that I thought was going to change so much of my life handed me a whole new set of challenges. As I got older and grew into the chairs in my own house, my home became a harder place to be. At the age of 12, my mom moved out, and I was left to care for myself and a father who mostly worked nights and whose substance use was growing worse and worse. At the age of 15, I came out as gay. Soon after that, I was homeless, and as a result of that, I was kicked out of my high school. At the age of 16, I was admitted to a mental health facility after trying to take my own life. At the age of 22, I was living in a van. And at the age of 26, I finally became a dancer, dancing for dollars. When Diana first approached me, told me about this amazing conference, and asked me to be a speaker, I wondered what a former sex worker like me would say to inspire a room of financial experts. If I could go back to that kindergarten classroom now, what would I say to make it different for myself and for the other kids? What does someone who used singles from her underwear to pay her rent have to teach all of you about money? I thought about teaching you all how to pick up dollar bills with your butt. But I decided that you can see me after if this is a skill set you would like to acquire. Instead, I'd like to talk to you about one of the biggest struggles that SIPs, which is an acronym that I use for service industry professionals face, and that is financial legitimacy. Throughout the course of my career in the service industry, I worked so many different jobs, and I learned so many different skills. I like to say that everything I needed to know to own and run a multi-million-dollar company, I learned working in the service industry. Over the years, I was a bartender, a go-go dancer, a stripper, a fetish performer, a sideshow showgirl, a circus performer, a flair bartender, a pole dancer, a coyote, and a cater waiter, just to name a few. One of my first jobs was as a waitress, and I remember being surprised by the questions and assumptions that I encountered from my guests. Questions that told me something about my chosen profession wasn't quite right. So what's your real job? What else do you do? Are you in school? What's next after this? Aren't you too smart, too pretty, too capable to be doing something like this for a living? Shouldn't you be doing something more? Maybe on your path to FI, you've also experienced these judgmental questions. Aren't you too young to be so focused on retirement? Isn't working less a waste of your skills and education? Don't you have more to contribute to society? Why are you saving so much money? What if you die tomorrow? Those judgmental questions form the foundation for the concept that I call financial legitimacy. And in my coaching practice, I use this concept to help my clients deconstruct the financial beliefs that they hold on to. the beliefs that make SIPs feel hopeless or that they'll never be able to achieve the life of their dreams. For my SIPs, it's really important to call out that their money and their careers are real, especially in order to build wealth. When you are used to getting paid in singles, or your federal subminimum wage is $2.13 an hour, it can be hard to imagine that ever accumulating to anything close to $1 million. When you don't have access to a 401k, paid time off, health insurance, an HR representative to help you set up benefits or automation, it can feel like you will never live a financially legitimate life. So why bother trying? Sorting through this is a lot for SIPs, but financial legitimacy is also important for people on the path to FI. The FI space is that kindergarten classroom. Perfect, me-sized, at first. You walk in and you say, yes, this is the place for me. But as you settle in, you realize rules don't work for everybody. You still need to find your people, and you still need to sort through all these ideas and beliefs. So what exactly is financial legitimacy? If legitimacy means conforming to recognized principles or standards, then I define financial legitimacy to be the beliefs and ideas surrounding our financial lives that we allow to stand and that make us feel valid. I'll give you an example. When I was 19, my dad passed away. And as I sat down with the funeral director, I learned that after all of the other expenses, I would be unable to afford a plot or a tombstone. In my mind, I felt as though I'd broken a financial rule by failing to purchase these things, and that I had robbed my dad of a legitimate death. Which, looking back, is kind of hilarious because he was legitimately dead. For many of us, financial legitimacy comes with a degree, a house, a career milestone such as a specific job title or a salary. In the FI space, we have a lot of milestones that we use as markers for where we are with our own financial legitimacy. Some of us sitting in this room right now may feel self-imposed shame or inadequacy because of where we fall within meeting those 5 milestones in the context of this particular kindergarten classroom. We may feel unsure as to where we stand in terms of meeting those milestones because we have resources that may not be optimized or perfectly measurable. Some of us may feel like we don't even have the right to claim FI because of a purchase, a hobby, a salary, or even a career path. But the more time I spend in this community and in my coaching practice, the more I realize how critical it is that we break apart these ideas of financial legitimacy, make room for more variation, and push back on where we allow or place meaning. Sorting through this is really important because when we feel illegitimate, financially or otherwise, we want to take action to make those feelings go away. And we want to make sure it's not the wrong action. For my SIPs, it could mean leaving a fulfilling career when really the fix was just to get on a stronger financial footing. For people in the FI space, it could mean sacrificing wellness, putting off opportunity, undergoing extreme deprivation, or financial binging. My response to the belief that I had dishonored my dad is a great example of this. I carried a lot of shame around what I perceived to be my inability to provide him with a legitimate death. And at the age of 19, I did not have the tools to navigate such a tremendous loss or understand that there were so many more ways to memorialize his life. And so one afternoon, I decided to drive past the house that I grew up, the one that had been sold just a few months prior. In a moment of grief, I grabbed a notebook from the back seat of the car, and I wrote a letter to the new homeowners. In it, I stated that this was my childhood home, that I had wanted it, but that it was sold against my wishes. I ended the letter by stating that if they ever decided to sell, to please reach out to me. Less than a week later, I got a response from the homeowners. And at the age of 20, I became the new homeowner of my childhood home. The house was 100% financed, and I paid more than twice the price that the previous owners had paid more than months earlier. To make financial matters worse, I spent the next year maxing out over 10 credit cards to renovate the house myself as a way to honor my dad. Grief, coupled with societal beliefs and a lack of financial literacy, makes you do stupid things. A year later, exhausted, deep in debt, and miserable, I sold the house, and I moved from Detroit to Los Angeles, where I lived in a studio apartment with 3 other women and responded to Craigslist ads for any, and I do mean any, type of gig that paid cash. I had amassed an impressive level of debt, fixing and furnishing a home that I no longer owned. I had creditors chasing me, and I was angry at a system for letting me get so in debt at such a young age. I also had a ton of anxiety. After losing a parent at such a young age, I was panicked with the notion that life is precious and short and meant to be lived. I spent the next 10 years traveling around the country and culling together different strings of construction and service industry jobs. I like to say I lived a dirt in the day and dirty in the evening kind of lifestyle. To add to the shame that I carried surrounding my debt, I was now facing more and more criticism from people around how I was choosing to get out of debt. It took me a long time to sort through my own feelings of financial legitimacy surrounding how I made my money. I had to learn to separate those societal beliefs from my own financial missteps. I had to learn to separate the environments I kept myself in from the systemic barriers I had inherited. I realized that those beliefs had prevented me from recognizing the fact that I loved what I did for a living, and I loved that I lived life on my own terms. My shame was layered, but even through the eyes of other people's judgment, I could also see a hint of envy that, in addition to what I felt in my gut, told me I was onto something with this alternative path. Alternativeness has become a theme of sorts in my life. After I was kicked out of my high school for being homeless, I applied to go to an alternative high school. I really wanted that proverbial and literal cap and gown. I remember walking into this strange school that consisted of a single carpeted hallway, less than 100 students, and feeling immediately accepted and understood. Here was a group of students who also had really tough life experiences, and because of it, they saw the world differently. They challenged assumptions of society, of school, of everything. And while the furniture and the people were right-sized this time, I recognized that something else was missing from this classroom. Our trauma and life challenges took the focus and got in the way of my education, leaving me with huge gaps in my knowledge. And so upon graduating and realizing I didn't have the money for college, I decided to create an alternative learning strategy. I made a book list of 100 books that I committed to reading. Some of the titles on this list were books I was supposed to have read in high school. Some were self-help and personal development. Others were business books and memoirs. But in the same way that graduating from an alternative high school still gives you a real diploma, alternative learning still gives you real knowledge. And on my path of alternativeness, alternative learning, alternative jobs, alternative partners, and now an alternative financial media company, I have explored and found what works best for me without blindly following any one particular person. I took the same approach when I first discovered FI, the rabbit hole that many of us know. For me, it started in 2016. And over the next few years, I obsessively listened to thousands and thousands of hours of podcasts, audiobooks, and read dozens of the personal finance Bibles. But interestingly, in all of those dialogues and interviews, I never saw or heard anyone who looked like me, someone who had spent their career in the service industry. How was it within this entire world of personal finance, and more specifically, this FI group, a group of people going against the grain, was there no one like me? And more importantly, no one talking to people like me, people who lived these financially alternative lifestyles and made most of their money from tips. In my coaching practice, I define being financially alternative as someone who's willing to carve their own path with their finances. You may be thinking, this sounds like the FIRE community, but I want to push back on that for a minute. Over the last 10 years, we have turned into that kindergarten classroom with our own culture, our own rules and best practices, and ultimately our own convention. We prioritize saving more money, spending less money, building out the perfect tax triangle with which to create a 4% based glide path. But the problem is that this is no longer novel or financially alternative. It's prescriptive, and it's focused on money rather than living. And as a group of individuals that started off by going against the grain, we need to go back to our founding vision of living like no one else is living. I had the time of my life living like no one else was living while I was working in the service industry. I loved that I got to move my body and meet new people. I loved that I got to talk about food and wine and sex and love and books and travel for a living. Was it a really high income? No, it was not. Thank you for asking. Was it in an environment that was conducive to saving money? Absolutely not. But it is an industry that is focused on living life to its fullest, unapologetically and with a little flair, and that is what it has to teach all of you. I remember talking to a college professor once who told me that the happiest people in the world are hairstylists. I remember asking him why, and he said, they get to see the beginning and end of a creative process every single day. They have mastery and autonomy over that process. They have a skill set that they can take anywhere at any time. And they get to meet new people and build relationships with their regulars and coworkers. When you think about this, it's a cheat code for life, and it describes a lot of the work in the service industry. But when you look at our numbers, we are not a thriving community. SIPs age into the most economically disadvantaged population in our country. And in many ways, I am not surprised, as we have long been ignored by the personal finance world. The most classically shouted advice: negotiate your salary, get the 401k match, ask for the raise, budget based off of your income. It doesn't apply. Our financial lives look different, and we needed specialized advice. But over the past few years, as I was writing my book, interviewing SIPs, and building out my coaching practice, I had come across a few SIPs who had sought specialized advice. And the advice that they received was to get out of the industry. Here we're taking a group of people who are this close to finally getting some good advice that they can take back, model, and share with their peers, a peer group that consists of more than 5.5 million people working in the second largest employment sector in the United States, and we are shipping them off to different industries without exploring environmental controls, mindset shifts, or other financial strategies that they can implement prior to abandoning a career that they may enjoy and excel in. As a country, we are facing an epidemic of loneliness, which makes service-based establishments all that much more important. I consider the service industry to be a keystone industry, the backbone of our economies and our communities. It props up our real estate valuations, which, as we know, is the second most common way that Americans build wealth and their path to FI. The jobs of waitresses, sex workers, hairstylists, bartenders is needed more than ever. The job of giving someone a smile, telling them that they are welcome, creating a space or a moment where somebody can forget a hard day, a place where the cooking, the cleaning, the dishes is not your own. I often think that FI people would love the service industry. After all, you have schedule flexibility, access to cash to shoulder sequence of return risk or purchase real estate, independent contractor status if you want to set up a SEP IRA or write off your health insurance, and the ability to back into an income number. I say all of this because I got to FI on the heels of my service industry career. And I realized that after I got my financial house in order, and the more I defined my financial legitimacy, I was actually really proud of my experiences. I carried around a lot less shame around how I earned money. And to me, that's what living a financially alternative life has meant. As a community, we need to stay focused on the life well lived. And I am passionate about showing people that you can work in the service sector, take some of these great lessons from the FI community, and live like no one else is living. Whenever I'm teaching budgeting for the first time, I always like to talk about my experience as a fetish and kink worker, because the lessons that I learned in this community perfectly address budgeting and can also be applied to people who are starting off on the path to FI. So I'd like to close out with some of this advice. Number 1, only people who are into feet want to talk about feet. In this particular kindergarten classroom, you will find so many flavors of FI. Find the people who are into what you're into and get weird. Number 2, the things you want most should be a part of your budget and your life now. I only have one rule when it comes to budgeting. You cannot budget for a hitman. You can still hire one, you just can't keep records like that. But you can budget for toys, substances, a kink or fetish, anything your heart desires. And number 3, boundaries are important, and they are your job to communicate. Whatever relationships or communities you find yourself in, you will need to establish boundaries. Saying yes is how others get what they want. Saying no is how you get what you want. If you disagree with a rule or FI convention, you do not have to commit to it to consider yourself legitimately FI. Instead, commit to expanding the definition of the standard. Today, I've reached my FI. Thank you. I live in a 400 square foot apartment in the heart of Manhattan that I gut renovated and made fully customized and right-sized for me. My 5-year-old self is so proud. My FI is somewhere between Coast FI and Lean FI, somewhere between I can do what I want, but maybe not wherever I want, somewhere between I have enough, but maybe not in the right places. But despite that, I am poised to walk away from a thriving multi-million-dollar construction business in the fall to set out on a year-long trip of personal discovery. Why? Because my money is the least interesting thing about me. And it is the least interesting thing about all of you. The old rules of legitimacy can only take you to known places. But if you keep thinking alternatively and make up your own rules, then you truly have the chance to discover. And that is what living your life is all about. Thank you.